Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we share all things people stuff in leadership. Learn from leaders who have done the hard yards and learn from experience. Hear from expert authors about the latest insights from culture to strategy and messy people dynamics. Get tips and insights from multiple award-winning author and leadership expert herself, Zoe Routh. Now, on with the show.
Hey, it's Zoe, and do you want like a secret weapon to maximize productivity, improve collaboration, and skyrocket your results? Of course you do. What if I told you it was a bit of magic? And this is where you comment, stop, and listening, move on to another podcast. Well, don't be so quick. My guest today has a fabulous book called Create Magic at Work. And she's got a lot to say on this idea of magic. And let's just throw the word out for a moment and talk about what it's really about. It's really about accessing our higher intelligence. It's really about connecting with other humans. It's really about seeing and feeling the bigger picture of who we are and the magic aspects of ourselves that we can bring to work. So let me tell you about our guest today. Her name is Amy Lynn Durham. She's the CEO of Create Magic at Work and has a book by the same name. She is a UC Berkeley certified executive coach, and she is certified in the 21 skills of spiritual intelligence, which I am also certified in, got certified years ago. The coaching program is based on the work of Cindy Wigglesworth, who I've quoted often on this show and in my work, who we've also had on the show, and we'll put a link in the show notes to the episode with Cindy as well. So Amy gets this stuff. She spends a lot of time developing self-awareness and creativity and connection with others. She comes from the corporate world where she's worked in high-flying corporate America roles and has had amazing insight about what it means to actually show up as authentic, deeply connected human in the workplace and still hit sales targets and productivity levels. So we're blending a little bit of spirituality and practicality in this fabulous episode and in this fabulous interview and episode. Phew, we got through that introduction. Well, let's get on with it. Let's do the show. Woohoo, all the way from stunning California. Welcome to the show, Amy Lynn Durham.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
It's wonderful to speak with you. First of all, I love California. I have relatives who live in California, so I feel so excited connecting with someone from the other side of the planet who's in the mountainous side of California. And I'm also excited to speak with you because, as we were discussing just before we hit record, that you are an SQ21 certified coach, as am I. And we were both saying we haven't spoken to somebody else who's done this certification before. And for our listeners, SQ21 is spiritual intelligence, and the 21 is the 21 skills of spiritual intelligence, written by Cindy Wigglesworth, who wrote this book. And it's a key reference material that I've used in all of my executive leadership work and coaching work for the last, 10, 15 years. And I quote her every day. So I'm thrilled that you are on board to talk about this. And the way that you talk about magic at work, and I know that's the name of your book,
Mm-hmm.
your book, and maybe the name of your Burke too, I'm not sure. But let's get a little sense of how you got to that point. How did you end up where you are doing what you're doing? And I'm sure you didn't start off as your first career as a coach. So what's the journey?
I know. I don't know how I got here. I'm sitting here like, how did I get here? Just kidding. So it was a long journey and it wasn't linear, right? So I was a corporate executive for many, many years. I worked for private, publicly traded companies. I was in a very competitive, cutthroat environment. At my peak, I was operating about $40 million a year and a little over 400 employees. And I hate to say it like this, but I am kind of a burnout statistic, if you will. And I planned on leaving my job for a year because I just really needed an outlet to be more creative in my life. And I was utilizing all these skill building activities with my employees, that helped them skill build in EQ, emotional intelligence, and SQ, spiritual intelligence. But I wasn't really like naming it with them what they were doing, because this final year that I stayed with my job, I wanted to make sure that when I left, this is my ego and my corporate competitive side of me. I wanted to make sure that I left on top and that nobody could go back and say, oh, you know, she left because she couldn't hang or whatever. That was my ego at the time. But it was really cool because I utilized all these activities with my employees that I ended up putting in my book. So really, the day that I decided to leave my corporate executive career, really, I made a list of how I wanted to be that final year and how I wanted my employees to feel, how I wanted to leave them. I really didn't have a plan. I knew I was going to go into coaching, start my own business, but that was about it. My plan was really, how was I going to leave my employees feeling? And then I left my office and there was a magnet in a store that I was shopping in that said leap and the net will appear. And so I grabbed it.
You hope.
And yeah. And it was, it's on my refrigerator to this day, just those little synchronistic signs that you get. And left, traveled over the summer a little bit, wrote my book, put all the activities in my book, Create Magic at Work, that leaders could utilize. I always joke around that I wrote Create Magic at Work for like the beer drinking golf guy I used to work with that had the best heart ever, but he just didn't know where to start with connecting people.
Those beer drinking golf guys, they're struggling. I have a beer drinking golf husband.
I mean, yeah, it's so funny. And then I discovered the UC Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute, went there, amazing experience, lots of work. They really put you through the ringer if you're going to be an executive coach. And then I discovered SQ21. When I left UC Berkeley, I was on this spiritual journey this whole time. Like this whole story of my life, this part of my life, I'm telling you, I was definitely on a spiritual journey. And people started asking me about spiritual intelligence all the time. And I hadn't even discovered the 21 skills from Cindy. I was studying Dana Zohar and just using my own tools that I had created with Create Magic at Work. Then I discovered Cindy's work and I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like we have 21 skills. We have a blueprint that's tangible for the workplace. And my skills in Create Magic at Work help you skill build in these skills. So it was like a perfect match for me. And I've been the SQ coach ever since.
That's awesome.
From Create Magic at Work. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like when you were an executive, right? So you're sitting there, you have 400 people, big portfolio, and you were using these exercises. How did you come across these exercises? Did you make them up? Did you discover them in your reading? Where did they come from?
Yeah, they came from me exploring my own spirituality at home and doing these things. And it sort of just occurred to me, I'm not going to get fired if I show up and do a journaling activity with my team where we're accessing our own inner wisdom. Or, I'm not going to get fired if we set some intentions today. But I just did it in a little more magical way where we like lit some stuff on fire after a meeting, right? So, and then...
You didn't set the fire alarm off? Did you have to go outside to light stuff on fire?
No, I actually have a little kit that we can utilize inside. It's like a throwback from the 70s. Yeah, it's from the Flying Wish Paper Company. And they made some custom kits for me for Create Magic at Work. You actually, it's pretty impactful because you light your intention on fire and it flies up in the air kind of out to the universe. And I was utilizing it in the workplace with, like the CEO of our company lit one on fire in front of everyone, was like, we're going to let last year go because we didn't hit what we needed to. Really powerful stuff. And I use it today in my workshops, in my experiences, in my presentations. It gives it like that wow factor. So
yeah,
got off on a tangent there, but yeah.
No, this is really important and interesting. Like talking about spirituality at work, right? So spirituality, I find, has many connotations. It's laced with associations, assumptions with it. how do you explain spirituality to the people around you? Like, I'm, first of all, placing you in corporate America. How do you talk about spirituality in a way that doesn't freak people out?
There's a couple of ways. First, I use all the data that proves that connecting people and seeing the humanity in each other actually improves productivity and profitability. You know, if I'm doing workshops or speaking with companies that want to improve their company culture or improve their retention rates, that's a really great way. We talked about spiral dynamics before we started recording. That's a great way to talk in orange, you know, corporate speak. So if employees are friends with each other at work, it boosts employee satisfaction by 50%. And so then your workplace culture goes up, your productivity, your profitability goes up. And these, what some people might call woo-woo, or these tiny little, you know, connecting activities are actually what allows someone else to see the humanity in each other because they're sharing them in front of each other. We're holding space for each other, doing these things. And then when I discovered the 21 skills of SQ, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Because, for example, I have a journal prompt card deck that I authored.
Really?
And
that's cool.
Yeah. And I authored it because I did it during lockdown. And I felt like we were getting inundated with advice on how we should do self-care or do this or do that. So what I did was, it's a deck of 33 cards. Each card has an affirmation and then 2 questions for you to consider. And it ties right into seeking guidance from your higher self, taking a moment to practice operating from your higher self. And it's a lot bigger than what it looks like, which is just a simple journaling activity, which is nice because a leader can do that and not feel overwhelmed like they have to be deep diving into SQ, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have your deck handy? Like, I'd
I
love
do,
to pull one right now.
Yeah, of course. So
all right, let's do this.
we'll pull a card for the listeners right now. Each card has a theme for your career or the workplace.
Yep.
So no matter when anyone's listening, this message is for them and for you and for us right now. Okay. I don't know. So we got preparation.
Awesome. Yep.
And the illustration is a bunch of spiders working together to make a web.
Cool.
And the affirmation on the card is, I am open to learning new skills in order to succeed.
Awesome.
Questions to pause and think about: what new skill can I master this month, or we're coming on to 2022, maybe next year. What new skill can you master? And another question to think about are, which tasks, hobbies, or work do you enjoy that cause you to lose time? Be in that fun zone. Preparation.
That's good. So it just, the cards help you to, as you said, pause, take a moment and reflect on you, who you are, what you're doing. So like, I love that. It's a practical 10. What skill could you learn? And then what hobbies light you up and help you get into that suspended animation experience, which is the state of flow.
Right.
Those exactly. are cool.
Yeah, thank you. I turned them into a little book too that you can journal in. And normally what I'll do is I'll have, if I'm doing it with a group, even on Zoom, I'll time it and I'll have everyone just rapid write so they don't overthink it. So they really can put their ego aside and hopefully operate from, like you said, that state of flow or that higher self.
And I think this is an important distinction that's probably useful to point out for spiritual intelligence, or I always put the caveat in there for people who still are allergic to that word. It's advanced emotional intelligence, the difference between ego and higher self. How do you explain that to folks?
I definitely don't villainize the ego. And I tend to sometimes weave the polyvagal theory in with that, but where it's when your nervous system is triggered and you feel like you're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode.
Oh, yeah.
That's sort of when your ego starts being in the driver's seat of your life, because your ego actually serves a purpose. It's there to protect you. So it's like, oh my gosh, thank you for being here for me and for rising up and trying to protect me. However, sometimes you do it when I'm actually not really threatened, but you just feel threatened. And so now what are some things, and it kind of goes back to EQ, what's my emotional management strategy when I'm becoming self-aware that my ego is triggered? What are some things that I can do that can pull myself out of what I like to call the red zone and get back into like that green high vibe where I'm accessing my higher self, which you and I both know is that space within you that comes from wisdom, compassion, and love.
Beautiful. It sounds so relaxing talking about it, right? So talking about the higher self, that place of wisdom and compassion and love, that bridge to people. And I love the idea of connecting and seeing humanity in others. And it's such a more peaceful way to approach leadership, that's for sure.
It is. That's really when you're a calm and healing presence. And when we talk to leaders about that, if you practice operating from that space, the people around you will start operating from that space as well a little bit more. And that's really leadership presence to me. Not how great you're dressed, how well you look, how well you can speak. If you are operating from your higher self more often than not, the people around you will start as well. And that to me is leadership presence.
Absolutely. So we should also mention that the being a calm and healing presence is one of the 21 skills that Cindy lays out in her book. And it's one of the later ones, right? I think from memory, it's number 20 or 21, I think.
Yeah, it's number 20, right before being aligned with the ebb and flow of life. So, yeah, I laugh because it's like, you have to have a sense of humor with this stuff because it's deep inner work. And that's why I love how the magic activities sort of give you the fun activities to do with it, because it sort of lightens it up a little bit.
Well, let's talk about some of those activities that leaders could do with their teams. And so in the theme for the podcast last quarter, it was high performing teams. And the theme for this quarter is actually holacracy. So autonomous teams. So how do people actually work as a unit and make decisions together and be an independent kind of unit? So I'm curious, like, what kinds of magic at work activities could you do for either of those things to help people collaborate more and be more productive?
Yeah. So the journaling together is huge, because when you journal together or you pick a journal prompt that pertains to the workplace and then you share your answers with each other, that connects everyone together. Because if I hear Zoe share something she's going through, it could have nothing to do with the project we're working on, by the way. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know she was going through that. I'm just making this up right now. Let me reach out to her and see what I can do to help her. And gosh, she used to get on my nerves in this meeting, but now she's amazing. And so all of a sudden you have two people connecting and talking that might not have in the past. What does that do for the leaders? It frees them up to do their own job instead of micromanaging. You start skill building your team and accessing their inner wisdom. You're going to start trusting them more to make decisions on their own. So that's just one example. And all of my examples have nothing to do with projects or standard team building. And they have everything to do with just connecting each other and seeing the humanity in each other.
And the research shows that increases productivity and the bottom line and employee engagement, all that sort of stuff.
It's so amazing because it's a win-win. And when I was in my old job, I was inundated with profit and loss statements, Excel spreadsheets, the whole thing. And I really had to be strategic about making sure I had time to do this stuff. I think the most important thing that leaders can understand is that this is so valuable, and you should allow everyone to make time for this, because this is what's going to increase your productivity and profitability. And actually have the people at work working. The disengaged team member is a lot of people's worst nightmare. The person that's there but not really doing anything.
That's right.
So
I'm imagining an executive team meeting, and they've got an agenda, and one of the agenda items is group journaling activity.
Yep, 100%.
And I can imagine my CEOs that I work with are like, this is going to be a new experience for them to test this out and try it out. What's a good first journaling exercise to get CEOs and their executive to play with if they're going to do group journaling? First of all, doing journaling in itself is not always a common practice. It's always something that I encourage my leaders to do. Doing it with their peers and their colleagues in a room is something that I would say they've never experienced with their own executive team. So what's a baby step? What's the first good starting question they could play with?
I have an activity that is called Discover Your Employees' Personal Goals. So you could have everyone write down, you take a breath, everyone closes their eyes, they get present. I don't know if a meeting agenda person would want to stretch that far, but I got to throw it out there to make sure it's facilitated, right? But you can have your team just write down, hey, what would you do in your life if you never had to work again? If you never had to earn a paycheck? If you never had to work another day in your life? I want you to write down 5 things you would do. And that's it. And then time it. Have everyone write in silence, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. And then when they're done, open up for sharing. You get to hear what means most to people often when they do that exercise. And you also get to hear what they might be putting aside in their life till next year, 10 years from now, because they're waiting for a different time because they're working so much. And so then the challenge you can do as a leader is say, okay, I've heard your list. Now I want you to commit to doing at least 1 or 2 of these things within the next year or whatever timeline. Give yourself a deadline, because the reality is most of us have to work to earn a paycheck. But the cool part about that exercise is the leader comes forward and gives them permission to work on some of those beautiful life passions that they might have been hiding. On top of that, everyone in the room gets to hear it. So casual conversation, hey, how's going to the gym going for you? I heard you wanted to, really make time to exercise. Or how's your planning for that trip to Europe going? By the way, you share you want to backpack through Europe to a really great leader. They hear that, gives you more permission to plan it. Makes the employee happier, makes them work harder at work, all of those things.
Do you think that this is something like this group journaling activity that you need to reserve for special time of year meetings with the team? Or is it a practice that you can embed in your weekly meeting?
Yeah, I was just thinking, no. Like weave it through your leadership. And I personally like to always do it at the end.
At end of the meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, I don't remember 2-3 years from now what sales goals I hit or what I talked about or what numbers were on the board. I remember that meeting and the feeling that happened when we connected. And if one of those individuals called me today, I'm there for them and we all still talk. And so they leave on that feeling of connection. They go out and execute the project in an efficient way.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's beautiful. The other question that's sort of lingering back, the CEO that you got to do the burning of something activity. So the pyromaniacs can get excited about that. What was that particular activity?
It's intention setting. So it's just adding a little connection in the workplace again. And you can do it around business goals. You can do it around personal work, whatever you're comfortable with. And you basically gather around. So I'll give you an example. We had a really crazy quarterly business review. And afterwards, I had my whole team gather around and write down something they wanted to let go of. And they could choose for work or even in their personal life. And we had become close because we'd been doing these activities. And so we wrote them down, and I have flying wish paper. So it flies up into the air when you light it on fire. And we just went around and shared, here, I want to let go of this. Light it on fire, flies up into the air. We have humorous stuff. One of my team members said he wanted to let go of his favorite sports team losing the game that past weekend. And everybody started laughing. And another team member said he wanted to let go of his stress from recruiting because we had to hire a bunch of employees. So, he lit that on fire. And then I had another team member pause in front of all of us and say he wanted to forgive his parents. So it was all over the place, and he was choked up, and we stood there for him and held space for that. And his vulnerability in that moment opened himself up to have deeper work friendships, which, by the way, boost employee satisfaction. So
yes, it does. It's like that's the deep emotional moment. And by the way,
I know. I'm like crying, and then I'm like, oh, and yeah. So that's why it's like such a win-win when you talk to. I have a quote in my book that talks about the selectively data-driven executive. I've been around them. They only talk about numbers and data that they're comfortable with. Oftentimes, those are tied to sales, hitting goals, aggressively achieving things, unhealthy competitiveness with people against each other. And so my hope is that we can move from a space of being selectively data-driven and look at the big picture, because it will really free you up as a leader when you do that.
So when you let go of that, what do you... are you bringing something else in?
When a leader lets go of
so selectively data-driven executive, if I've understood you correctly, is just paying attention to the numbers and reports that you feel comfortable addressing and ignoring what the people side of things, the emotional side of things is.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
And so getting leaders comfortable to create spaces where they can do a journaling activity like that and have someone be able to say, I want to let go of how my parents treated me, and being okay to hold the space for them that's an advanced skill. It is one of the 21 spiritual intelligence skills to be able to hold the space for people to do that. And it's not what every executive is able to do for either, first of all, for themselves, like to be able to know that you've got your own stuff to let go and process and own and share. And then to create the space for other people to do that is quite an extensive thing.
Yeah, I hear you. I get it. There's a couple of things I say to that. The first is, if you are in a high-level leadership position, you have the responsibility to step forward and do some of the things that you need to do to connect individuals. You're in this place of power. If you don't feel equipped, I always say just start with something small. Start a meeting. I'm sure you've heard this, start a meeting where everyone shares what they're grateful for. And if you're in a environment where people aren't used to that and they start laughing or they think it's silly, okay, laughter is a stress reducer. Let them laugh. Just take a little step forward and see what happens. Because I think what you're speaking to is the leaders that have been in systems that were, I don't want this conversation to end without recognizing that we work in systems that oftentimes do not allow for this type of stuff, for these types of activities to occur, or it may feel like it's not allowed. I would offer that you make tiny little tweaks and see how it lands and just see what happens.
I love the encouragement to experiment, and absolutely something I encourage with my amplifiers. And that's actually a critical shift that leaders need to make, is becoming an experimentalist, is to try out new stuff. Not just, keep focused on the numbers and trying to juggle that, because that's not what high performance is. High performance is not just meeting your targets consistently. It is also about the journey and the experience of the activity of creating those results. And that's about sharing humanity. That's for sure. So I'm curious, like you went through sounds like a big personal experience as an executive. And as you said at the beginning, that you were a burnout statistic and you made a conscious decision to leave well and to move into a new place. Like in that, I don't know, it was a dip or a peak when you were an executive. What was your chief insight about your journey there?
The biggest shift or insight for me was that the win-win opportunities that we've been talking about this whole episode. Like, oh my gosh, I don't have to be this raging competitive person where I'm stepping all over everyone to get to the top. I can actually have great work friends and facilitate these connections, and we are making even more money. So I think that was the chief insight, which inspired me to leave and re-inject myself into the workplace in this way to sort of share the message.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty major breakthrough, right? It's not one or the other. It can be both. And bringing more humanity to work is the fact that it's good for the bottom line is just kind of mind-blowing.
It is. And it goes against how we've operated for many, many years in those systems, right? Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Dana Zohar. She's a philosopher and a physicist. She does a ton of work in the spiritual intelligence space. And she has a lot of SQ, spiritual intelligence books for corporate world. She likes to mix East and West business practices. And she talks about quantum leadership in her latest book. It's called The Quantum Leader. And she talks about innovation and inspiration coming out of chaos and mistakes. And I love it because it just turns kind of the way that most companies operate on their heads as far as like how you can achieve goals without this 1 + 1 = 2 or A + B = C.
Cool. Well, I will definitely check that out, and we'll put a reference to Dana Zohar and the Quantum Leader in the show notes, along with
she's cool.
Along with links to your journal prompt deck, which I'm also going to go and check out.
Yay!
And your book, which is awesome. So, in terms of tips for listeners, what are your 3 hot tips, if you like, for developing EQ or SQ?
Okay, so I'll give you one for EQ because it does. You'll find it in my book. It's about creating an appreciation anchor. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but it's basically how the brain can experience gratitude and anxiety at the same time. So, tip, create an appreciation anchor for yourself. And if you're feeling triggered or defensive or shut down in the workplace, you can grab your appreciation anchor and take some breaths and just think about that. And it'll bring you back to a space of gratitude and kind of it opens up the neocortex in your brain and kind of gets you out of that amygdala triggered space. I use crystals. So I'll often have a crystal in my pocket. When a lot of leaders that I work with that do keynotes, they might have a little crystal in their pocket, to hold on to if they're nervous. A lot of people utilize maybe a photo of a loved one or a necklace that they can hold on to. Whatever works for you. Yeah, create an appreciation anchor.
So the anchor, whatever object you choose, the idea is that you associate appreciation and gratitude with that particular object. And so that when you hang on to it or look at it, that it brings you back into that state of appreciation and gratitude. Is that how it works?
You got it. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. Take some breaths while you're doing it too. Yeah.
Yeah. I have lots of crystals. I've got this fantastic black dragon crystal head, which I love. He's pretty magical. And I've got crystal skulls, and I play with all this stuff too. So it's a bit of fun. I used to, I haven't done it lately, but I would make pouches for company conventions or events. And I would pair them to the company values, like the crystals. So I would make a positivity pouch. And then the employees would have it and they'd be like, oh, I have my positivity pouch. And it would have a specific crystal recipe in it that,
they could hold on to. And it was really popular, and people loved them because it's a stressful situation in work and things like that. And if they have their pouch, their positivity pouch, it sort of helps them through. And I'll do one for values, for company values as well. So
beautiful. That's fantastic. Cool. And your SQ tip?
My SQ tip today, because I personally go through this journey, so I learn all the time. I'm constantly studying, and I have been wowed by the breadth of time perception. And what I say to leaders, the question I pose to ask yourself is under that skill, which is, because it ties to servant leadership. I'm setting this up because there's a lot of talk about servant leadership in the workplace. And sometimes I question if leaders really have a true understanding of what that means to them. And so I would offer that they think about this question from SQ, which is, can you live with the paradox of knowing that your life is both extremely profound and also a tiny piece of the history of the universe? And can you make leadership decisions from that space?
Well, that's sitting in the balance of that, right? So, and looking up the stars is one way to access that reflection. How big is the universe? Oh, pretty big. How big am I? Pretty small. And sitting in the mix of the truth of that, and then being able to make decisions based on that, actually makes things a lot easier in some ways. So in my book, People Stuff, we talk about expanding perspective, and the aspect of expanding perspective is looking far, and far is the timeline horizon. And when you look at how big and small we are, then it kind of reduces the ego voice and accesses the higher self voice a lot more significantly. And you can let go of a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Or I think I saw the other day somewhere, standing by the ocean too. Like you're looking at the stars and standing by that huge body of water and feeling that paradox of how small you are, yet how extremely important you are.
So I've read some research on that, and that vistas, big horizons, actually change our brain state. So it gets us into a state of awe, and it reduces the activity in our frontal lobe, which is where we have our sense of ego and separateness. So that gets dialed down in the presence of big, beautiful, expansive views, or in the presence of an amazing piece of art, or watching an amazing performance. Anything that sort of gives you that sense of awe changes your brain state, like I said. And what happens is that you reduce sense of ego and separateness and increase sense of connection to everything around you, puts you in the space of deep appreciation, gratitude, and oneness. And astronauts, a lot of astronauts have this experience when they go into space, is they look back on the planet and they see how tiny and fragile it is in the huge, dark blackness of the rest of the universe. And that deep sense of connection to all living things and this planet that we call home changes them. And they have basically an enlightenment experience, and they feel deep connection to all of humanity. And many of them come back from their space experience, become humanitarians, environmentalists, and change their perspective on who they are and their sense of us-ness. It's no longer, I'm home, I'm back in Russia, or I'm back in the US. It's, I'm home, I'm back on planet Earth. And this is my place within the universe. And I think that's really important work to do as leaders, is to access that state where we do feel that deep interconnection. So I love that you raise this as a tip for SQ, this breadth of time perception and space perception, because it puts us into a different state of being. And I think we can lead with wisdom and compassion better when we're in that state, because we just have such deep appreciation for the fleetingness of life and the sacredness of it.
Oh, so good. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. You just had me thinking too, like, oh, that's what you just shared. That's why some people run to the mountains instead of meditating. And let them do that, let go, adventure, whatever works for you. That just hit me. Yeah. That's cool.
Oh, absolutely. So meditation is one way to access it. Being in a beautiful places is another way to access it. Being in a state of appreciation for creativity, all that kind of stuff. So we mentioned a couple of different books. Have you got any other favorite books or podcasts that you recommend to people if they want to explore this a little bit further, apart from obviously your own beautiful work?
Yeah, I just started my own podcast. Everything's under Create Magic at Work, but I definitely recommend The Quantum Leader from Dana Zohar, because I think she really deep dives into servant leadership quite a bit. Podcasts, I don't know if I have one offhand. I listen to quite a few, but the ones that I listen to tend to be on the astrological side. So I don't know. Let me think about that one and get back to you. Maybe we can put it in the show notes.
Okay, no worries.
Another book that I actually just recommended to a client. I had a client who was really studied in like business mentors, like Tony Robbins type guys, but he wanted to access his spirituality a little bit more. And I think a great starter to that is Deepak Chopra's 7 Spiritual Laws to Success, because it really uses language that a business-minded person can get around, but then it also can open you up to like what he likes to call that field of pure potential that you can tap into. Pure potentiality, that he calls it. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Oh my gosh.
I have one. Go
Can
on.
I share one more?
Yeah. And then I've got one for you.
Okay. So Dr. Angelis Arian wrote The Fourfold Way. And if you want to transition to like leader as coach, that's a really great one.
Okay. What's it called? Dr. Arian?
Mm-hmm. The Fourfold Way. And it covers the 4 universal communication principles. And it helps you transition from leader to more coach, if you will.
All right. Yeah. I will definitely check that one out. And one for you, if you haven't come across it, is Ginny Whitelaw's book, Resonate and the Way of Making a Difference. And she's fascinating because she is not only a NASA scientist, she is an Aikido Zen master. And she weaves those things into her book. And it's all about vibration and how you can access different states by using different Aikido breathing practices, essentially, is some of her main tips. And I think you'll really enjoy that book as well.
That's cool. I will definitely check it out, because that's been coming up a lot. Like, how can you vibrate on different levels? Or like how we talked about, like if you're operating from your higher self, other people can, all of those things. So yeah.
Yeah, it's all over that stuff. So she's awesome. Amy, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. It's been fun riffing on the topic of spiritual intelligence and magic at work. And your tips are all really practical and I think really juicy and really usable for people to go ahead and experiment with and explore this side of things and watch how their own emotional state and the emotional state of their team changes. And the results will take care of themselves afterwards, I reckon.
They definitely will.
Well, thank you so much for the gift of your presence and your wisdom being on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been fabulous.
Thank you. I hope we brought some magic to everyone today.
I'm sure we did. Well, I really enjoyed talking with Amy today. It was so good to talk to somebody else who's done the work with SQ21 and talking about this way of accessing the best part of ourselves. And I talk about wisdom and compassion all the time in my work. It's really fundamental to the work that I do with amplifiers. It's fundamental to the work that I do with executive coaches, in my executive coaching work with leaders. And it's really a central premise in my book, People Stuff. So leading with wisdom, compassion, which is best of our mind and best of our heart, so we can both be sensible and sensitive, is the main principle here. And the conversation with Amy sparked a renewed an interest in journaling. It sparked a renewed interest in intention and also in connection and just being brave to take a few risks in meetings in particular to get people to share those aspects of themselves, because we are all desperate to live happier, more fulfilling, amazing lives. And we don't give ourselves permission enough to do that. And by doing these little activities, whether it's doing a round of appreciation and gratitude, or whether it's actually doing a journaling exercise with your group, or whether it's lighting something on fire to let it go, all those things are awesome. And if we just did a little bit more of that, imagine the magic that we could experience. Well, I hope you got lots of little magic awakenings in this episode, in this interview with Amy. I certainly did. And if you want to play with other people, other like-minded leaders who are happy to experiment and to talk about this kind of stuff, do consider joining us in Amplifiers. Amplifiers is my advanced leadership development program for CEOs, managing directors from diverse sectors around Australia and hopefully around the world. We don't have any international people just yet, and I'm totally welcome and open to bringing people from around the world into the program. And if this sounds like of something of interest to you, have a look at our website, zoerouth.com, click on programs, click on amplifiers, and there you go. It's a good starting place. Otherwise, you can email me, zoe@zoerouth.com. I love hearing from listeners. I love hearing what's lighting you up and what you're getting from the show. So in the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast with leadership expert Zoe Routh. For more about people stuff and to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.